To tell the story of Homo erectus is to embark on a journey into an almost unimaginable past. It is a story that stretches across 2 million years, a span of time so vast that it challenges our very perception of history. We are accustomed to thinking in terms of centuries, perhaps a millennium or two. The pyramids of Egypt feel ancient to us, yet they were built a mere 4,500 years ago. The reign of Homo erectus lasted more than 400 times longer than that. To comprehend this is to look up at a clear night sky, not to see the bright, familiar points of light, but to gaze into the profound darkness between the galaxies, a darkness that holds eons within its silence. This is not the story of a single individual, or even a single generation. It is the biography of a species, a long, patient thread woven into the very fabric of the Pleistocene epoch, the Great Age of Ice. It is a narrative of resilience, adaptation, and a quiet, persistent intelligence that allowed this remarkable ancestor of ours to not just exist, but to thrive across a changing world. They were the first to walk fully upright with a modern human gait, the first to master fire, and the first to journey out of the African cradle and into the vast, unknown continents of Asia and Europe. Theirs was a world of mammoths and saber-toothed cats, of shifting climates and colossal ice sheets. It was a world of immense challenge, and yet they endured. Our purpose here is to explore how they achieved this unparalleled endurance. We will follow their footsteps from the sun-scorched savannas of Africa to the temperate forests of Java and the chilly plains of Georgia. We will examine the physical form that made them so successful, their tall, sturdy bodies, their larger brains, and the anatomy that allowed for endurance, running, and long-distance travel. We will consider the tools they crafted with such skill, the Achillean hand axes that were their constant companions, and the profound implications of their control over flame. We will ponder the mysteries of their social lives, their communication, and their understanding of the world around them. But before we can meet Homo erectus, we must first understand the world they inherited. We must travel back to a time before their arrival, to the world of their predecessors, to set the stage for one of the most successful and enduring sagas in the entire history of human evolution. This is a story written not in words, but in stone and bone, in genetic echoes, and in the simple, profound act of survival, season after season, for 2 million years. So, let us begin at the beginning, in the deep, warm heart of Africa, as the world was changing, and a new kind of hominin was about to step onto the stage. To appreciate the revolution that was Homo erectus, we must first look at the world from which they emerged. It was a world already inhabited by a variety of hominins, our evolutionary cousins, each finding their own way to survive in the challenging landscapes of Pliocene Africa. The climate was shifting, becoming cooler and drier. The vast, dense forests that had once covered much of the continent were gradually retreating, giving way to a new and expansive environment, the savanna. This was a mosaic landscape of open grasslands, scattered woodlands, and gallery forests following the courses of rivers. It was a world of both opportunity and danger, a place where the ability to see over the tall grass and to travel efficiently across long distances would become keys to survival. Before Homo erectus, the most famous of our ancestors was You may recall the famous fossil known as Lucy, a member of the species Australopithecus afarensis. Lucy and her kind were bipedal. They walked upright on 2 legs. This was a monumental evolutionary step, freeing the hands for other tasks. But their gait was likely not as smooth or efficient as our own, or that of Homo erectus. They were still partly adapted to life in the trees, with longer arms and curved fingers, a testament to a time when the forest canopy was a primary source of food and safety. Their brains were not much larger than those of a modern chimpanzee. They were clever, to be sure, but their toolkit was simple, likely consisting of little more than unmodified stones or sticks used for momentary tasks. Then, around 2.5 million years ago, the genus Homo appeared. The first members of our own genus, such as Homo habilis, or the handyman, took the adaptations of the Australopithecines a step further. Their brains were noticeably larger. More importantly, they were the first to consistently create and use stone tools. These were the all-down tools, simple yet effective. They would select a cobble, a core stone, and strike it with another stone, a hammerstone, to knock off sharp flakes. The core became a chopper, useful for breaking open bones to access nutritious marrow. The flakes were razor-sharp, ideal for slicing through tough animal hide or cutting meat from a carcass. This was a significant breakthrough. It meant that these early humans could now access a rich, high-energy food source, meat and fat, whether from hunting small game or scavenging the kills of larger predators. But Homo habilis and its contemporaries were still limited. They were small in stature, with bodies that retained some primitive traits. Their range appears to have been largely confined to East Africa. They were creatures of a specific ecological niche, successful in their own right, but not yet poised for world domination. The world was changing more rapidly now. The ice ages were intensifying, locking up vast quantities of the Earth's water in polar ice caps, which led to even drier conditions in Africa. The savannas expanded further, creating a continent of wide-open spaces. It was into this world of challenge and opportunity that a new, dramatically different hominin was born. This new species possessed a body and a mind built for this new world of grass and sky. They were the pioneers, the long-distance walkers, the masters of their environment. They were Homo erectus. The emergence of Homo erectus was not a subtle shift, but a dramatic leap in human evolution. When we compare their fossil remains to those of their predecessors, we are looking at a creature fundamentally redesigned for a new way of life. The blueprint of the modern human body was, for the first time, clearly laid out. The key to their success was written in their bones, a suite of anatomical adaptations that made them the first truly global hominin. The most striking change was in their stature. While earlier hominins like Homo habilis were perhaps 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, Homo erectus stood tall. They reached heights of up to 6 feet, with long modern limbs. Their legs were longer than their arms, a reversal of the proportions seen in earlier, more ape-like ancestors. This new body plan was engineered for efficiency on the ground. The pelvis was narrower and bowl-shaped, providing a stable base for the organs and anchoring the muscles needed for walking. The thigh bones angled inward from the hips to the knees, a configuration that places the feet directly under the center of gravity with each step. This is the anatomy of a strider, a creature built not for scrambling in trees, but for covering vast distances across open terrain with a minimal expenditure of energy. This efficiency of movement cannot be overstated. On the expanding African savannas, food and water sources were often widely scattered. The ability to travel long distances in a day, to follow migrating herds, or to reach a known waterhole during a dry season was a matter of life and death. Homo erectus could do this better than any hominin before them. Some scientists have even suggested they possessed adaptations for endurance running, perhaps allowing them to practice persistence hunting, a method where prey is chased to the point of exhaustion in the heat of the day. This tall, lean, long-legged body was their passport to a wider world. Above this revolutionary body sat a head that was also transforming. The skull of Homo erectus is unmistakable. It had a low, sloping forehead, with a prominent brow ridge shading the eyes. At the back, a strong bony ridge, called an occipital torus, anchored powerful neck muscles. But encased within this robust skull was a brain that had grown significantly. While Australopithecus had a brain size of around 400 to 500 cubic centimeters, and early Homo around 600, the brain of Homo erectus expanded to an average of 900 cubic centimeters, with some specimens reaching over 1100. This was a brain capable of greater complexity, of more sophisticated social organization, and of a technological tradition that was far more advanced than anything that had come before. Their faces were also less protruding than those of earlier hominins, a feature possibly linked to dietary changes and a reduced reliance on powerful chewing for tough, raw vegetation. Their teeth were smaller, especially the molars. This shift suggests that the use of tools to process food, cutting meat into manageable pieces, perhaps even pounding tubers and plants, was already reducing the demands on their chewing apparatus. The body of Homo erectus was a unified system, each part working in concert. The legs carried them farther, the hands fashioned tools to make food easier to eat, and the larger brain coordinated it all, allowing them to navigate, learn, and adapt. They were a new kind of animal, equipped with a new kind of intelligence, and they were ready to put it to the test. The physical form of Homo erectus was the vehicle for their success, but it was their mind that provided the engine. The most enduring testament to their cognitive leap is found not in their bones, but in the stones they left behind. With Homo erectus, toolmaking evolved from a simple, opportunistic activity into a sophisticated, planned technology. They were the masters of the Herculean industry, named after the site of Saint-Étienne in France, where such tools were first identified, though the tradition itself was born in the heart of Africa a million years earlier. The signature tool of this era was the hand axe. To call it an axe is perhaps a little misleading, for it was not hafted to a handle. It was a core tool, typically teardrop or oval in shape, held directly in the hand. But its creation was an act of foresight and skill that far surpassed the simple flaking of the old Dowan tradition. A toolmaker would select a suitable piece of stone, often a large flake or a fine-grained cobble like basalt or flint. Then, with a softer hammer of wood, bone, or antler, they would carefully shape it. They would strike the edges with precision, removing smaller flakes in a sequence to create a tool that was not only functional but also symmetrical, and often remarkably thin. This was not a quick process. It required a mental template, an image of the finished product held in the mind of the maker before the first blow was struck. The uses of the Herculean hand axe were likely as varied as the challenges of daily life. It was a universal tool, a Paleolithic Swiss army knife. Its sharp, durable edge could be used for butchering large animals, scraping hides, chopping wood, or digging for roots and water. The sheer number of these tools found across continents, and their consistent form over hundreds of thousands of years, speaks to a technology that was incredibly effective and successfully passed down through countless generations. It was a stable, reliable foundation for life. But perhaps the most profound discovery, the one that truly set Homo erectus apart and changed the human relationship with the world forever, was the control of fire. The evidence for this is scattered and debated, but by around 1 million years ago, there are sites, such as Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where the ashes and burned bones suggest the presence of a contained hearth. The mastery of fire was a revolution on multiple levels. It provided warmth, allowing Homo erectus to survive in cooler climates and endure cold nights, a crucial advantage as they moved into temperate zones. It provided light, pushing back the darkness and extending the useful day, creating time for social interaction beyond sunset. It offered protection, a flickering ring of safety that could deter the large predators that shared their world. And most importantly, fire changed their diet. Cooking food, especially meat and tough tubers, made it easier to chew and digest. It unlocked more calories and nutrients, which may have contributed to supporting their larger, energy-demanding brains. Cooking could also kill parasites and bacteria, making food safer. The control of fire was not merely a convenience, it was a fundamental transformation of their ecology. With stone tools in their hands and fire at their hearths, Homo erectus possessed a technological buffer against the hardships of the Pleistocene, a buffer that granted them a resilience never before seen in the human lineage. They had tamed a fundamental force of nature, and in doing so, they took a giant step toward shaping their own destiny. Equipped with their new anatomy, their sophisticated tools, and the revolutionary control of fire, Homo erectus did something no hominin had ever done before. They left. They walked out of the African continent and began to populate the Old World. This was not a single, organized migration with a defined destination. It was more likely a slow, relentless expansion, a gradual diffusion of populations over countless generations, a process so slow that it would have been imperceptible to the individuals living through it. They were simply moving, season by season, year by year, following the rhythms of the land, the movement of animals, and the shifting climate, until one day, their descendants found themselves in landscapes their ancestors could never have imagined. The routes they took are still a subject of investigation, but geography provides the most likely paths. One route led northwards, up the Nile Valley and across the Sinai Peninsula into the Levant, the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. From there, they could turn west into Europe, or continue eastwards across Asia. Another potential route, especially during periods of low sea levels when the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the southern end of the Red Sea was much narrower, could have allowed a crossing from the Horn of Africa into the Arabian Peninsula. This southern route would have provided access to the vast expanses of southern Asia. The timing of this dispersal is being constantly pushed back by new discoveries. For a long time, it was thought that Homo erectus left Africa around 1 million years ago, but spectacular finds have dramatically rewritten this timeline. At the site of Dmanisi, in the country of Georgia, nestled in the Caucasus Mountains, fossils of hominins have been found that are remarkably primitive, dating back to an astonishing 1.8 million years ago. These individuals had small brains and simple tools, yet they were already far from home, demonstrating that the urge to explore, or perhaps the pressure to move, was present almost from the very beginning of the species. Further east, on the island of Java in Indonesia, other Homo erectus fossils, known as Java man, have been dated to around 1.5 million years ago. How did they reach an island? During the ice ages, when vast amounts of water were locked up in glaciers, sea levels were much lower. What are now islands in Southeast Asia were often connected to the mainland by land bridges, creating a vast subcontinent known as Homo erectus could have walked most of the way to Java, perhaps only needing to cross narrow stretches of water on natural rafts of vegetation, a phenomenon known as island hopping. This incredible spread across the globe, from the fringes of Europe to the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, is a testament to their unparalleled adaptability. They were not confined to a single type of environment. They learned to survive in the seasonal climates of Georgia, the monsoonal landscapes of India and China, and the steamy tropics of Java. Each new environment presented its own challenges, different predators, different plants, different seasonal cycles, and yet, the core adaptation of Homo erectus, their technology and their social flexibility, proved equal to the task. They were the first cosmopolitans of the human family, the first to truly make the world their home. Their footprints, both literal and metaphorical, were now pressed into the earth of 3 continents. To understand the survival of Homo erectus, we must move beyond the grand sweep of migration and invention and into the granular details of their daily existence. What was the texture of life across 2 million years? It was a life shaped by the sun and the seasons, by the relentless search for food and water, and by the intricate bonds of the social group. It was a life of profound skill and constant vigilance. Their diet was omnivorous, a key to their flexibility. They were skilled hunters, capable of bringing down large game. Evidence from sites like Olorgesailie in Kenya shows piles of stone tools mixed with the bones of extinct elephants, hippos, and giant baboons. Whether they were the primary hunters of such massive animals or skilled scavengers taking advantage of predator kills is debated, but they were undoubtedly effective at procuring meat. This high-quality protein and fat was crucial, especially in cooler climates, but hunting is unpredictable. The bulk of their diet likely came from gathering roots, tubers, fruits, nuts, seeds, eggs, insects, and small animals. The woman walking across the savannah, her eyes scanning the ground for edible plants, her ears listening for the rustle of a lizard, was just as important to the group's survival as the men tracking a herd of antelope. The use of fire to cook food would have made these gathered resources, particularly tough tubers, more palatable and nutritious, turning a marginal food into a staple. The rhythm of their days was dictated by the landscape and the task at hand. Mornings might have been spent foraging near a campsite, perhaps a place near a reliable source of fresh water. The afternoons could involve longer treks to check traps or to hunt. Toolmaking was a constant activity. A broken hand axe needed to be replaced. New flakes needed to be struck for a butchering task. This was not done in isolation. It was a social skill, learned through years of observation and practice. A child would watch an elder select the right stone, hold the hammerstone at the correct angle, and strike with just the right amount of force. The sound of stone knocking against stone was a familiar percussion in their lives. Their social world is more difficult to reconstruct, but we can make educated inferences from their tools and their ecology. They lived in small, mobile bands, probably consisting of 20 to 30 individuals. These were likely kin-based groups, containing several adults, both male and female, and their children. Survival in a dangerous world required cooperation. Hunting large game, defending against predators, raising offspring, all of these were collective enterprises. There must have been some form of communication more complex than the calls of apes. A proto-language capable of conveying information about past events and future plans, about the location of resources and the presence of danger. The shared experience of gathering around a fire in the evening, the flickering light illuminating faces, would have strengthened these social bonds, providing a space for storytelling, for teaching, for the transmission of culture from one generation to the next. Life was undoubtedly hard. Evidence from fossils shows signs of injury, disease, and the wear and tear of a physically demanding life. A broken bone that healed suggests that the individual was cared for by the group during their recovery. The very old and the very young were vulnerable. But there is also evidence of resilience and success. They raised their children to adulthood. They survived injuries that would have been fatal without support, and they persisted. Day after day, season after season, generation after generation, they lived their lives. They knew the satisfaction of a successful hunt, the comfort of a warm fire on a cold night, the joy of a child's laughter, and the grief of loss. This rich, complex, and enduring daily life was the true foundation of their 2-million-year reign. The story of Homo erectus is not a story of a static world, but of a planet in constant, dramatic flux. Their entire existence, from their emergence to their eventual decline, was set against the backdrop of the Pleistocene epoch, often called the Great Ice Age. This was a time of profound climatic instability, where the very conditions for life shifted repeatedly and drastically. The ability of Homo erectus to survive for so long is a testament not just to their adaptation to a single environment, but to their resilience in the face of a changing planet. The engine of this change was the glacial cycle. For reasons related to subtle variations in the Earth's orbit and tilt, the climate would oscillate between long periods of glaciation and shorter, warmer intervals known as interglacials. During a glacial period, massive ice sheets, sometimes over a mile thick, would advance from the poles and from high mountain ranges, covering much of North America and Europe. So much water was locked up in ice that global sea levels could drop by over 100 meters, exposing vast coastal plains and connecting continents. During an interglacial, like the one we live in today, the ice would retreat, sea levels would rise, and climates would become warmer and often wetter. For Homo erectus, these cycles meant that their world was constantly being remade. A lush, green corridor that allowed them to migrate into Europe during a warm period might become an arid, cold steppe, or even an impassable wall of ice during a glacial advance. The familiar grasslands of Africa could contract during dry periods, expanding into deserts and putting immense pressure on the plants, animals, and hominins that relied on them. Populations would have been isolated, forced to adapt to new conditions or face extinction. This is where their generalized toolkit and flexible diet became their greatest advantage. A specialist species, evolved to eat only one type of plant or hunt one type of animal, would have been vulnerable to these shifts. But Homo erectus could hunt a wide variety of game, from deer and horses to elephants and rhinos. They could gather whatever fruits, nuts, or roots were in season. If a particular resource became scarce, they could shift their focus to another. Their stone tools, the reliable Achillean hand axe, were a technology for all seasons. It was as useful for butchering an animal on the plains of Africa as it was for chopping wood in a forest in China. The control of fire was perhaps their most powerful weapon against the cold. As they moved into northern latitudes, they encountered winters that would have been fatal without a source of warmth. A sheltered cave or a simple hut, illuminated and heated by a controlled fire, became a refuge against the icy winds and snow. It allowed them to push into territories that were otherwise off-limits to a tropical primate. They were not just passive victims of climate change. They were active agents, using their intelligence and technology to buffer themselves against the worst of the environmental pressures. This ever-changing world also drove innovation and dispersal. A period of drought might force a population to move in search of water, leading them into a new valley or across a previously unpassable landscape. A drop in sea level would reveal new land bridges, inviting exploration. The story of their spread across the globe is inextricably linked to these pulses of climate change. They were children of the ice ages, their fate tied to the rhythm of the glaciers. Their 2-million-year story is a powerful lesson in resilience, showing that the ability to adapt to change is often more important than being perfectly adapted to any single, static condition. They endured because they could learn, they could move, and they could persist through the long, cold winters and the shifting sands of time. As the millennia turned into hundreds of thousands of years, the story of Homo erectus becomes more complex and regionally diverse. Isolated for vast stretches of time by distance, mountains, deserts, and changing sea levels, populations in different parts of the world began to follow their own evolutionary paths. The uniform template of the early African Homo erectus began to differentiate, adapting to local environments and perhaps developing unique cultural traits. we see the emergence of what might be called regional varieties, each a testament to the species' remarkable ability to specialize while retaining its core identity. In the Far East, on the island of Java, Homo erectus endured in isolation for an extraordinarily long time. The environment of Southeast Asia was a world of dense rainforests, volcanic activity, and rich coastal resources. The Java populations, sometimes classified by scientists as Homo erectus, became specialists in this tropical world. Fossil evidence suggests they were still present on the island as recently as 100,000 years ago, and possibly even later. This means that for over 1 million years, they thrived in their island home, a staggering duration of continuous occupation. Their world was one of steady climate, but also of unique challenges and resources, shaping them into a distinct branch of the Erectus lineage. Meanwhile, in the northern latitudes of China, at sites like Shaokudin, near Beijing, famous as the home of Peking man, a different population was adapting to a much more seasonal climate. These northern Homo erectus faced cold winters and had to develop strategies for survival that their Java cousins did not. Evidence from Shaokudin is particularly significant because it shows extensive use of fire. Layers of ash meters thick suggest that hearths were maintained there for generations, a central part of their life in the cold. They hunted animals like deer and wild horses, and their toolkits, while still within the Herculean tradition, show local variations. This population represents the successful adaptation of Homo erectus to the challenges of a temperate climate, a success built on the controlled use of fire and sophisticated hunting techniques. In Africa, the continent of their origin, Homo erectus continued to evolve. Here, the evolutionary pressures were leading toward even larger brains and more refined technologies. From these African populations would eventually arise new kinds of humans, such as Homo heidelbergensis, a species considered by many to be the common ancestor of both Neanderthals in Europe and Homo sapiens in Africa. But for a long time, classic Homo erectus persisted alongside these emerging new forms, a reminder that evolution is not a simple, linear ladder but a complex bush with many branches existing simultaneously. This period of regional variation was the culmination of their successful dispersal. It was not a story of decline, but one of diversification. From the tropical forests of Indonesia to the cold plains of China, Homo erectus had proven itself to be the ultimate generalist, capable of specializing when necessary. They were not a monolithic entity, but a widespread species with many faces, each population a unique response to the specific demands of its environment. For hundreds of thousands of years, these different branches of the Erectus family thrived in their respective corners of the world, their separate stories unfolding in parallel, all under the long shadow of the Pleistocene ice ages. No species, no matter how successful, endures forever. The world continues to change, and new challenges inevitably arise. The story of Homo erectus does not end with a sudden catastrophe or a dramatic extinction event. Instead, it concludes with a slow and gradual fade, a drawing down of the curtains on a performance that had lasted for 2 million years. Their disappearance was a complex process, playing out differently across the vast territories they inhabited, as new players emerged on the stage of human evolution. In Africa, the heartland of the species, the transition was likely one of evolution rather than extinction. The populations of Homo erectus there did not simply vanish. Instead, over hundreds of thousands of years, they gradually evolved into new forms of humanity. Through a series of incremental changes, slightly larger brains, more finely made tools, perhaps more complex social structures, they transitioned into what paleoanthropologists classify as Homo heidelbergensis. This was not a replacement, but a transformation, a passing of the torch to a descendant species that would go on to give rise to both Neanderthals and our own species, Homo sapiens. In this sense, the lineage of Homo erectus never truly died out in Africa. It flowed directly into the rivers of later human history. In other parts of the world, the story was different. In Asia, the isolated populations faced a different fate. The Java population, for instance, persisted for a remarkably long time, but they eventually disappeared. The reasons are still unclear. It is possible that a major volcanic eruption in the region, around 70,000 years ago, disrupted the ecosystem catastrophically. It is also possible that they simply could not compete with the changing climate and fauna of the late Pleistocene. Similarly, the populations in China seem to vanish from the fossil record. Here, a new possibility emerges: the arrival of modern humans, Homo sapiens, when our own species began its own great migration out of Africa around 60,000 to 80,000 years ago. They eventually reached the territories long occupied by Homo erectus. What happened when these two kinds of human met? There is no evidence of violent confrontation, but neither is there clear evidence of interbreeding, as there was between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. It is possible that the encounter was indirect. Homo sapiens, with their even more advanced technology, complex language, and sophisticated social networks, may have simply been better competitors for the same resources. They may have hunted the same game more efficiently, or gathered food more effectively, slowly outcompeting the resident erectus populations over generations. The result was not a war, but a quiet ecological replacement. The older, resilient lineage of Homo erectus, after dominating the Earth for an unimaginable span of time, gradually yielded to the new, dynamic species that would come to define the modern world. And so, the long day of Homo erectus came to a close. But to say they disappeared is to misunderstand their profound impact. Their legacy is not just in the fossils we uncover, it is etched into our very being. They were the first to give us our modern body plan, the template for the human form. They were the first to master a complex and standardized technology, the Acheulean hand axe, demonstrating foresight and planning. Most importantly, they were the first to harness fire, a conquest that fundamentally altered our relationship with the world, providing warmth, protection, and a cooked diet that may have fueled our expanding brains. They were the pioneers who dared to leave Africa and colonize the globe, proving that the human spirit, the drive to explore and adapt, was a force of nature. In every step we take, in every tool we use, in every fire we light, we pay homage to the 2-million-year journey of Homo erectus, the first true global human and one of the most successful species ever to walk the earth. The silence that followed the passing of Homo erectus was not an empty silence. It was a silence filled with the potential they had unlocked, a world now primed for the successors who walked in their footsteps. To contemplate their 2-million-year reign is to confront a timescale that humbles our own brief history. Civilizations have risen and fallen in the blink of an eye, compared to the slow, patient unfolding of the Erectus saga. Their story forces us to expand our definition of success. In our modern world, we often measure success in terms of rapid growth, technological disruption, and domination. Homo erectus presents a different model: success as stability, as resilience, as a deep and enduring harmony with the rhythms of the natural world. Their legacy is not confined to the dusty shelves of museum collections. It is alive within us. Every time a human child learns to walk with that distinctive, efficient, striding gait, they are recapitulating the revolutionary adaptation of Homo erectus. The fundamental architecture of our bodies, our long legs, our narrow hips, our upright posture, is their gift. We are, in our physical form, living monuments to their evolutionary triumph. The capacity for patience and planning, the ability to hold a mental image of a finished tool and then painstakingly bring it into reality, is a cognitive thread that connects our minds to theirs. The social bonds that allowed them to care for their injured and raise their young in a dangerous world are the deep roots of our own complex societies. The world they inhabited is also our world, though greatly changed. The ice ages they endured shaped the very landscapes we know today. The coastlines they walked when sea levels were lower are now submerged, holding secrets of their journey. The animals they hunted, the mammoths, the giant deer, the saber-toothed cats, are gone, but their fossils are a testament to the challenging and magnificent world they called home. In a very real sense, Homo erectus was the first to truly know this planet, to experience its vast diversity from the equator to the temperate zones. What can we learn from their incredible endurance? Perhaps the most poignant lesson is about adaptability. They survived not by resisting change, but by flowing with it. When the forests retreated, they adapted to the savanna. When the climate cooled, they mastered fire and moved north. When resources shifted, they moved on. Their strategy was flexibility, a willingness to learn and to change their behavior in response to a dynamic environment. In an era now defined by human-driven climate change, their example is more relevant than ever. They remind us that the key to long-term survival is not brute force, but intelligence, cooperation, and the ability to adapt. Finally, The story of Homo erectus is a profound meditation on our own place in the universe. They were conscious beings who looked up at the same stars, who felt the warmth of the same sun, and who faced the same fundamental challenges of existence: to find food, to seek shelter, to protect their loved ones, and to make sense of their world. Across the immense gulf of time, we can recognize in them a shared experience, a common thread of life and struggle. They were the first to carry the torch of human-like consciousness on its long journey through the ages. Though their individual names and stories are lost to time, their collective achievement endures. They walked the earth for 2 million years, and in doing so, they prepared the world for us. Their long twilight was not an end, but a dawn. And as we, the children of that dawn, look back into the deep past, we see, in the steady, patient gaze of Homo erectus, not a strange and primitive creature, but a distant, resilient, and foundational part of our own human family. The story of how we came to know Homo erectus is itself a fascinating tale of scientific discovery, a detective story spanning continents and centuries. For most of human history, the very existence of these ancient relatives was utterly unknown. Their story began to emerge only in the 19th century, as the science of geology revealed the immense age of the Earth, and the new discipline of paleontology began to unearth a world of lost creatures. The first clues were not complete skeletons, but fragments of skullcap here, a tooth there that challenged the prevailing understanding of humanity's place in nature. The initial discovery that would eventually lead to the identification of Homo erectus took place not in Africa, but in Southeast Asia. In the 1890s, a Dutch anatomist named Eugene Dubois became obsessed with finding the missing link between apes and humans. He theorized that the tropics would be the most likely place to find such a creature, and he enlisted in the Dutch East Indies Army to be posted to Java. His persistence paid off. On the banks of the Solo River, his team unearthed a fossilized skullcap and a femur, a thigh bone. The skullcap indicated a creature with a small, sloping forehead and a heavy brow ridge. Yet the femur was straight and modern, clearly from a creature that walked upright. Dubois named his find Pithecanthropus erectus, the upright apeman. The world was skeptical. Many scientists refused to believe that this primitive-brained creature could have walked like a modern human. Yet Dubois had found the first tangible evidence of a human ancestor, far more ancient than any previously imagined. Meanwhile, in China, another dramatic chapter was unfolding. In the 1920s and 1930s, excavations at Zhaokudian Cave, near Beijing, yielded a treasure trove of fossils. These remains, famously known as Peking Man, were initially classified as Sinanthropus pekinensis. The discovery was monumental. The cave contained not only bones, but also evidence of fire use and thousands of stone tools. It painted a picture of a resourceful, tool-making, fire-using human ancestor. Tragically, the original Peking Man fossils were lost during the chaos of World War II, a devastating blow to science. Fortunately, meticulous casts and descriptions had been made, preserving the data for future study. As the 20th century progressed, more and more fossils were found across Africa, Asia, and Europe. It became clear to scientists that Dubois's Java Man, the Peking Man from China, and various finds from Africa all represented regional variations of the same broad species. The name was consolidated into Homo erectus, recognizing them as true members of our own genus, Homo. The African discoveries, particularly in places like Kenya's Turkana Basin, proved to be the oldest, confirming Africa as the cradle of the species. Each new fossil, each carefully excavated site, added another piece to the puzzle. The picture that emerged was not of a crude, failed experiment, but of a highly successful and adaptable pioneer. The scientific journey to understand Homo erectus is far from over. Every year, new excavations yield fresh insights. Advanced dating techniques refine the timeline of their existence. Geochemical analysis of their teeth can tell us about their diet and where they traveled. The study of the sediments in which their tools are found reveals the ancient environments they inhabited. It is a slow, painstaking process of reconstruction, a conversation across time between the silent evidence of the past and the curious, questioning minds of the present. The story of Homo erectus, once a mere theory, is now a richly detailed chapter in the epic of human evolution. A chapter that continues to be written with every stroke of the archaeologist S. trowel and every calculation of the geochemist S. mass spectrometer. They are no longer a mystery, but a testament to the power of scientific inquiry to illuminate the deepest reaches of our shared past. As we reach the final contemplation of this long history, we arrive at the most profound and elusive mystery of Homo erectus, the nature of their inner world. What was it like to be a conscious being 2 million years ago? While we can never fully know the quality of their thoughts or the depth of their emotions, the evidence they left behind provides tantalizing clues. By piecing together the archaeological record, we can attempt a respectful glimpse into the mind of this most successful of our ancestors. The sophisticated technology of the Acheulean hand axe is our first and greatest window. The creation of these tools required more than mere intelligence. It demanded a capacity for abstract thought. The toolmaker had to see the finished product within the raw stone before a single blow was struck. This implies foresight, planning, and a sense of symmetry and aesthetics that goes beyond pure utility. The consistency of these tools across vast distances and times suggests the presence of a strong cultural tradition, a right way to make a hand axe that was taught and learned over generations. This transmission of complex knowledge points to a form of communication far more advanced than the basic alarm calls of other primates. It suggests a proto-language, perhaps not as syntactically complex as our own, but capable of conveying detailed instructions, naming objects, and sharing experiences. Around the evening fire, stories may have been told, not with words as we know them, but with gestures, sounds, and demonstrations, recounting the day's hunt or pointing out the patterns of the stars. The control of fire offers another profound insight, the ability to nurture a flame, to keep it alive through the night, to bank it for the next day, requires a deep understanding of cause and effect. It represents a mastery over a powerful and dangerous element. This suggests a mind capable of foresight and responsibility. The fire was not just a tool, it was a social focal point. The space around the hearth was likely the first true home, a place of safety, warmth, and social bonding. The shared experience of gathering around the light, away from the predators of the dark, would have strengthened group cohesion and fostered a sense of community and shared identity that is fundamental to human nature. We can also infer a rich emotional life from the evidence of their endurance. The care for the injured, as seen in fossils where broken bones have healed, indicates compassion and empathy. An individual who could not contribute to the group's immediate survival was not abandoned. They were supported, their life valued. This points to strong social bonds and a deep-seated understanding of mutual dependence. The grief of loss, the joy of a successful hunt, the curiosity of exploring a new valley, the satisfaction of crafting a perfect tool. These are all universal human experiences that we can reasonably project onto them. They were not biological robots. They were sentient beings navigating a complex world, feeling the full spectrum of emotions that bind social creatures together. Their artistic or symbolic world, however, remains a deep mystery. Unlike later humans, Homo erectus left no cave paintings, no carved figurines, no evidence of personal adornment, like beads. Does this mean they lacked symbolic thought? Not necessarily. Their art may have been ephemeral body painting, sand drawings, wooden carvings, or songs that have left no trace in the archaeological record. Their symbolism may have been entirely functional, embedded in the rituals of toolmaking or the social hierarchies of the group. The very longevity and stability of their culture could be seen as a different kind of masterpiece, a society so perfectly adapted to its world that it felt no need for radical change for over 1 million years. Their art was survival itself, perfected to a degree no human society has ever achieved. To contemplate the mind of Homo erectus is to stand at the edge of a great abyss of time and to recognize a flicker of familiar consciousness on the other side. They were not us, but they made us possible. In their patient endurance, their technological ingenuity, their social compassion, and their brave exploration of the planet, we see the foundations of everything we are. They were the first to walk fully into the light of human-like awareness, and their long, quiet reign over the earth is a humbling and powerful reminder of the deep, slow roots of the human spirit. This concludes our narrative on Homo erectus. Thank you for sharing this journey through the immense expanse of deep time. And so, we arrive at the final moments of this epic narrative. The long, steady reign of Homo erectus gradually drew to a close. Not with a sudden cataclysm, but with the quiet inevitability of a sunset after an impossibly long day. Their disappearance from the fossil record is a subtle process, playing out differently across the vast canvas of the Old World, a testament to the varied challenges faced by the last isolated populations of this venerable species. In their African homeland, the story was one of continuity. Here, the line between late Homo erectus and their descendants, often classified as Homo heidelbergensis, becomes beautifully blurred. There was no distinct endpoint, no moment of extinction. Instead, through generations of incremental adaptation, a slight increase in brain size, a refinement in tool technology, a deepening of social complexity, the essence of Homo erectus evolved seamlessly into a new form. In Africa, they did not die out. They transcended, giving birth to the lineage that would eventually produce our own species. Their genetic and cultural legacy flowed directly into the future, a river feeding into an ever-widening sea. In the easternmost reaches of their domain, on the island of Java, the end was likely more absolute. The population there, isolated for hundreds of thousands of years, finally met challenges from which even their profound resilience could not recover. A changing climate, the catastrophic eruption of the Toba volcano around 74,000 years ago, which may have caused a global volcanic winter, and the pressure of a new, dynamic predator and competitor Homo sapiens conspired against them. For these last holdouts, the world that had been their home for over 1 million years changed too quickly, too drastically. Their fossil record simply ceases. The silence that followed was the silence of an entire branch of the human family tree reaching its end. The departure of Homo erectus from the world stage created an ecological and evolutionary space. Their disappearance left niches to be filled, landscapes to be re-inhabited. For a time, in parts of Eurasia, their evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals, became the dominant hominin. But the ultimate heirs to the world, shaped by Homo erectus, were our own direct ancestors, Homo sapiens. We who emerged from Africa with a new suite of cognitive and cultural abilities, walked into a world that Homo erectus had prepared. We used the trails they had blazed, we adapted to the climates they had first endured, and we built upon the basic technological foundation they had established. To bid farewell to Homo erectus is not to mark a failure. It is to honor an unparalleled success. For 2 million years, they were the embodiment of the human spirit of exploration and adaptation. They were the first to truly embrace the world in all its diversity, the first to master the elements, the first to create a stable, enduring way of life. Their story teaches us that success is not merely about innovation and rapid change, but also about stability, resilience, and a deep, harmonious relationship with one's environment. As we look back from our own frantic, rapidly changing epoch, the long, patient twilight of Homo erectus holds a profound lesson. They remind us of the strength found in community, the power of learned tradition, and the importance of flexibility in the face of a changing world. They were the first to carry the torch of consciousness, and they carried it with unwavering steadiness for an epoch. Though their individual voices are lost to time, their collective achievement echoes through the ages. They were the foundational chapter of the human story, the first explorers, the first pioneers, and their long journey home across the vast plains of deep time remains one of the most magnificent sagas in the history of life on Earth. This concludes our comprehensive history of Homo erectus. Thank you for your company on this journey through time. As the final echoes of Homo erectus fade into the deep past, we are left not with an absence, but with a permanent presence. Their story does not truly end, for it continues in the most fundamental aspects of our own existence. To understand their eternal legacy is to recognize that, in countless ways, both great and small, we are still living in the world they helped to create. The ghost of Homo erectus does not haunt us. It walks with us, a silent partner in every human endeavor. Consider the simple, unconscious act of walking. When we stride across a park, hike a mountain trail, or simply cross a room, we are using a gift perfected by Homo erectus. The biomechanical efficiency of our gait, the spring in our step, the endurance in our limbs, all of this was their revolutionary innovation. They crafted the human body into the ultimate long-distance machine, freeing our hands and allowing our minds to wander even as our bodies moved. Every journey we undertake, whether by foot or inspired by the very idea of journeying, owes a debt to their pioneering spirit. They instilled in the human lineage an innate restlessness, a desire to see what lies beyond the next horizon. Their legacy burns brightly in the most primal of human symbols: fire. The controlled use of flame was arguably their most transformative conquest. It shifted the very rhythm of human life from being dictated solely by the sun to having some mastery over the night. This control over light and warmth created a space for social complexity to deepen. The campfire became the first classroom, the first council chamber, the first theater. The tradition of gathering round a source of light and warmth to share food, stories, and knowledge is a direct inheritance from the hearths of Homo erectus. The warmth we feel from a fireplace on a cold night is the same warmth that comforted them 1,000,000 years ago. The sense of safety and community it fosters is their enduring gift to us. Even the way we think and solve problems bears their imprint. The Herculean hand axe was more than a tool. It was a physical manifestation of abstract thought. The process of envisioning a symmetrical, functional object within a formless stone and then systematically revealing it required a cognitive leap that laid the groundwork for all future engineering and design. The patience, the planning, the step-by-step execution. This is the foundational pattern of human technology. When a modern engineer designs a skyscraper or a programmer writes a complex code, they are utilizing a cognitive capacity for foresight and structured creation that was first cemented in the mind of Homo erectus. Their greatest lesson, however, may be one of resilience. In an age now defined by the rapid, often disruptive, changes we have wrought upon the planet, the 2,000,000-year endurance of Homo erectus stands as a powerful testament to a different way of being. Their success was not based on dominating nature, but on adapting to it with intelligence, flexibility, and cooperation. They demonstrate that long-term survival is not about constant growth, but about finding a sustainable balance. They teach us the value of tradition and the careful passing of knowledge from one generation to the next. In a world facing unprecedented environmental challenges, their story is a profound reminder that the keys to our future survival may well lie in the deep, patient wisdom of our past. So, as we go about our modern lives, we can remember that we are not the first to face a changing world. We are the heirs of the first true global citizens, the children of the firemakers and the pathfinders. The spirit of Homo erectus, resilient, adaptive, curious, and social, is not extinct. It is alive within us. It is the bedrock of humanity. Their long day may have ended, but the dawn they helped to create continues to illuminate the human journey. This concludes our journey with Homo erectus. Thank you for walking this path through deep time. Their story is now complete. As we bring our exploration to a close, we arrive at a final reflective chapter, one that bridges the immense gap between their world and ours. The story of Homo erectus is not merely a catalogue of fossils and dates. It is an invitation to a silent dialogue across time. The evidence they left behind, a hand axe, a charred bone, the impression of a heel in long-hardened mud, is their voice. And our act of studying, interpreting, and wondering is our response. This dialogue, though separated by millennia, connects us to the deep flow of human experience. The stones they so carefully shaped are their most eloquent speakers. When an archaeologist holds an Herculean hand axe, they are not just holding a tool. They are feeling the weight of the original raw material, seeing the same flaws and possibilities in the stone that the toolmaker saw. They can trace the individual flake scars, each one representing a precise, calculated blow. In this act, there is an intimate connection. The modern researcher can understand the angle of the strike, the amount of force required, the skill involved in thinning the core without breaking it. For a moment, the 2,000,000 years that separate them collapse. The mind of the toolmaker becomes accessible, their intentions and their expertise laid bare in the enduring stone. It is a conversation without words, a sharing of knowledge and skill directly from one mind to another. The landscapes they inhabited are another medium for this dialogue. To stand on the East African savanna, at a site like Olorgesailie in Kenya, is to see the world through their eyes. The same acacia trees dot the horizon, the same volcanic mountains frame the sky. The bones of ancient animals, now fossilized, are scattered exactly where they were butchered. The wind that blows across the plain is the same wind that cooled their faces. In such a place, the past is not abstract. It is palpable. One can almost feel the presence of the group gathered around a carcass, the sounds of stone on stone, the calls to one another. The environment itself becomes a portal, allowing the imagination to cross the chronological divide and share a moment of their lived experience. This silent dialogue is not just an academic exercise. It is a profoundly humanizing one. By engaging with the reality of Homo erectus, we are forced to expand our definition of what it means to be human. They were not primitive brutes stumbling toward humanity. They were intelligent, successful beings who found a way to thrive for an almost incomprehensible span of time. Recognizing their intelligence, their compassion, and their resilience allows us to see the deep roots of these very qualities within ourselves. It humbles us, reminding us that our own civilization is a very recent experiment. It also inspires us, showing us the strength and adaptability that is our shared inheritance. Ultimately, the story of Homo erectus is a story about time itself. Their 2-million-year tenure holds a mirror to our own fleeting existence. It asks us to consider what legacy we will leave behind. Will we, like them, create something enduring? Will our actions demonstrate a resilience that allows future generations to thrive? The silent dialogue with the past inevitably turns into a conversation about the future. Homo erectus, in their long, patient wisdom, offer no easy answers, but they provide a powerful example that survival depends on harmony with the world, on the strength of community, and on the courageous, never-ending spirit of adaptation. And so, we leave them now, not as extinct strangers, but as distant ancestors whose journey made our own possible. The dialogue will continue, with every new fossil discovery, with every technological advance in analysis, and with every person who pauses to consider the deep history of our species. The stones will continue to speak. It is up to us to continue listening. As our journey through the age of Homo erectus reaches its final rest, we come to a place of quiet understanding. We have followed their path from the first upright steps on the African savanna to their eventual fading into the mists of time. But before we take our leave, we must acknowledge one final, crucial truth. The story of Homo erectus is not a separate tale, ended and sealed in the distant past. It is the first, foundational volume of our own story. We are not merely observers of their history. We are living continuations of it. An unbroken chain of existence connects us to them, a chain of breath, of heartbeat, of conscious experience stretching back to million years. Consider the continuity of life itself. Every human being alive today is the result of an unimaginable succession of successful survivals. Each of your ancestors, back through countless generations, lived long enough to reproduce. They found food and water. They avoided predators. They navigated the challenges of their time. And somewhere, at the dawn of our genus, those ancestors were Homo erectus. The blood that flows in your veins carries the genetic legacy of those who mastered fire, who crafted the first sophisticated tools, who dared to explore new continents. The instinct that draws us to gather around a source of light and warmth on a dark night is an instinct they forged. The satisfaction we feel when we skillfully create something with our hands is an echo of the satisfaction felt by a toolmaker perfecting a hand axe. This connection is not merely biological, it is cultural and cognitive. The very way we learn through observation, imitation, and gradual mastery was the learning method of Homo erectus. A child watching a parent cook is engaging in the same fundamental transfer of knowledge as a young Homo erectus watching an elder shape stone. Our capacity for social cooperation, for dividing tasks, for caring for the weak and the injured, has its deep roots in the social groups that were essential for their survival. The human traits we hold most dear, curiosity, resilience, compassion, ingenuity, were not invented recently. They were field-tested and refined over the immense span of the Pleistocene epoch. Homo erectus was the great cultivator of these seeds, tending them through the long seasons of ice and change, until they became the bedrock of the human character. Therefore, we do not say goodbye to Homo erectus, we acknowledge them. We look back along the unbroken chain and recognize the links that hold us to the deep past. Their journey did not end, it transformed. Their adaptations became our inheritance. Their explorations mapped the world we would later come to dominate. Their discoveries, fire, the designed tool, the social heartbeat, became the fundamental elements of human civilization. So, as you go from this narrative back to the world of the present, carry with you this sense of connection. When you walk easily and confidently across a room, remember the pioneers who perfected that gate. When you feel the warmth of a heater or a fireplace, honor the first masters of flame. When you solve a complex problem through planning and patience, know that you are using a mind that was shaped and sharpened over 2 million years of survival. The age of Homo erectus is not a closed book. It is the first and longest chapter in the still unfolding story of humanity. Their time has passed, but their presence endures. It endures in us. This concludes our history. Thank you for walking this path of discovery. The narrative of Homo erectus is now complete, but your connection to it is a living, breathing reality.